The air in courtroom 3B was frigid, smelling of old wood polish and stale anxiety. Marcus Thompson, CEO of Apex Solutions, smirked at his lawyer, his $5,000 Italian suit perfectly tailored. In the front row of the gallery, his mistress, Chloe Jensen, crossed her legs, a smug, victorious smile playing on her lips. They both glanced at Sarah Thompson, the wife of 15 years, who sat alone, looking small and defeated in a simple navy dress. Marcus was about to finalize the deal of his life, trading in his starter wife for a newer model and keeping his entire $500 million empire. What he didn't know, and what Chloe couldn't possibly imagine, was that Sarah's laptop didn't just contain financial records. It held a 4-minute audio file that wouldn't just end the marriage, it would detonate his entire life and send his mistress running in shame. 15 years. That's how long Sarah Thompson had been the perfect corporate wife. She had been Sarah Connolly, a promising art restorer with a keen eye for detail, when she met Marcus Thompson, then a junior analyst with colossal ambitions. He had been charming, relentless, and dazzling. "You're the foundation, Sarah," he'd told her, his hand over hers at a tiny Italian restaurant. "Without a foundation, nothing can be built." She believed him. She put her own career on hold, trading her brushes and solvents for catering calls and guest lists. She organized the fundraisers, charmed the investors, and edited his late-night presentations, her keen eye catching flaws in logic, not just brush strokes. She was the invisible scaffolding that allowed him to build Apex Solutions into a tech giant. She managed their sprawling Chicago penthouse, their Hamptons estate, and his entire social calendar. He called her his rock at awards dinners, kissing her cheek for the cameras as she smiled, always gracious, always in the background. The first crack in the foundation was almost invisible. It was the scent of a perfume, Fracas by Robert Piguet, a heady, almost aggressive floral, clinging to his suit jacket one night. Sarah wore Jo Malone's peony and blush suede, a soft, subtle scent. "The new VP from the Paris office wears it," Marcus had said dismissively, loosening his tie. "It's suffocating. I'm going to have to tell HR." Then came the later nights, more frequent than ever. "Server migration in Zurich," he'd text. "Board emergency." He'd sigh. "This round of funding is killing me, honey." Sarah, ever the supportive wife, would leave a plate of food for him in the warming drawer and go to bed alone. The true betrayal wasn't found in a text message. It was found on a credit card statement. Marcus was meticulous about his business expenses, but he'd gotten sloppy with their household Amex, a charge for $8,200, not for a client dinner, but for a couple's spa weekend at the Peninsula, right there in Chicago. The date was their 15th wedding anniversary. Marcus had told her he was stuck in a crisis meeting with the board and had sent a massive bouquet of orchids to the penthouse with a note, "Next year, Sarah, I'll make it up to you, M." She stared at the charge. The Peninsula, Chicago. He hadn't even bothered to leave town. She scrolled down. Weekly charges for dinners at restaurants she'd wanted to try. Alinea, Smith, all for two. And then the final, brutal confirmation. A receipt from Cartier for a Justin Clou bracelet. The exact bracelet she had seen on the wrist of Chloe Jensen, his ambitious new director of strategy, in a photo from the company's last top performers event. Chloe, the young, sharp-elbowed woman Sarah had personally mentored 2 years ago, advising her on how to navigate the male-dominated tech world. The woman Sarah had invited into her own home for a team dinner. The ground didn't just crack beneath Sarah, it split wide open, revealing a dark, cold chasm. Sarah was a restorer. She didn't destroy things, she fixed them. She understood that to repair a masterpiece, you first had to see every flaw, every layer of grime, every hidden forgery. For 1 week, she said nothing. She gathered her data, tracing the timeline of the charges, the late nights, the business trips. She didn't hire a private investigator. She didn't need to. Marcus and Chloe were arrogant, convinced of their own brilliance and of her quiet, domestic irrelevance. They'd been careless. She finally confronted him on a Tuesday night. He was in his study, a glass of $300 Macallan in hand, reviewing market projections. "How was your spa weekend at the Peninsula?" Sarah asked, her voice quiet, but it cut through the silence of the penthouse like a diamond. Marcus didn't look up from his screen. "What are you talking about? I was in Zurich." "That's strange," Sarah said, stepping into the room. She placed the Amex statement on his antique mahogany desk. "Because your credit card says you were in Chicago, enjoying an 8-200 couples spa weekend on our anniversary." Marcus froze. He looked up, his eyes, usually so charismatic, turning to cold, flat steel. He stared at the statement, then at her. He didn't bother to deny it. The time for lies was over. "So," he said, leaning back in his chair, "you finally figured it out. Took you long enough." The casual cruelty of it hit her harder than a slap. "Marcus, 15 years. 15 years of what, Sarah?" He stood up, towering over her. "You think this," he waved his hand around the opulent room, "is free? I built this. You decorated. You've had a very comfortable life. I supported you. I gave up my life for you, for Apex. You did your job," he said, his voice laced with contempt. "And now, that job is redundant. I'm filing for divorce." Sarah felt the air leave her lungs, but she held her ground. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer. Half of Apex is mine." Marcus actually laughed, a cold, sharp bark that held no humor. "No, it's not. That's the beautiful part. You're not getting anything from Apex. You're not getting the Hamptons house. You're not getting the art collection. You'll get this apartment, which I'm sick of anyway, and a standard alimony package." "That's not how it works, Marcus. We're in Illinois. It's marital property." "Not when there's a post-nuptial agreement, darling." He walked to his bookshelf, pulled out a thick, leather-bound folder, and tossed it onto the desk. "Page 22. Your signature. You signed away all rights to Apex, and any future earnings from it 10 years ago, in exchange for, let's see, primary ownership of the marital home, and a one-time payment of $500,000. Sarah stared at the document, bewildered. I never signed this. I would never sign this. But you did." He pointed to the last page, and there it was, her signature. Sarah Connolly Thompson. It was her signature, but she had no memory of it. "When?" she whispered, her mind racing. "Remember that stack of insurance renewals for the art collection? Back in 2015? You were complaining about how long it was taking." He smirked. "You should really read what you signed, Sarah. You signed it. It was notarized. It's ironclad. You're getting nothing." He picked up his scotch. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a call with Chloe. We're celebrating our new strategy." He walked out of the study, leaving Sarah standing in the wreckage of her life, the smell of his expensive scotch mingling with the phantom scent of fracas. For 48 hours, Sarah barely moved. She was trapped in a haze of humiliation and disbelief. He hadn't just cheated on her. He had plotted against her. He had defrauded her, tricking her into signing away her entire life's work. He'd played her for a fool, and she had fallen for it. The $500 million empire she had helped build was gone, stolen by her own hand. On the third day, the restorer in her woke up, the part of her that understood that you couldn't fix a painting until you found the original canvas. She looked at the post-nup again, The signature was hers, but the context was a lie. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a crime. It was fraud in the inducement. But how could she possibly prove it? It was his word against hers, and he was Marcus Thompson, the golden boy of tech. She was just the wife who decorated. She hired Diana Hayes, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being a shark with a scalpel. Diana's office was sleek, modern, and overlooked the river. She was a woman who radiated expensive, no-nonsense competence. "It's a bad situation, Sarah," Diana said after reviewing the document. "The signature looks genuine. A handwriting expert might find subtle duress, but it's a long shot. You signed it. His story about the insurance papers is disgusting, but it's legally clever. He can claim you were a willing signatory and are now suffering from divorce-induced amnesia." "It happens." "He's lying," Sarah insisted, her voice shaking. "He's arrogant. He's a bully. He must have bragged about it. He must have told someone." "Unless you have a recording of him admitting it, we're looking at a very, very small settlement," Diana said, her face grim. A recording. The word hung in the air. Sarah's mind flashed back. Marcus wasn't just arrogant, he was paranoid. After a minor break-in at their Hamptons house 5 years ago, he had turned their penthouse into a fortress. Not just cameras, but a fully integrated smart home system. Lights, temperature, music, security. Everything was voice-activated, run through a central hub. "He called it total integration," Sarah murmured. "He was paranoid about corporate espionage." "Smart hubs," Diana said, a flicker of interest in her eyes. "Amazon Echo, Google Home. They're always listening. They store audio files." "He has one in his study," Sarah said, her heart suddenly pounding. "A high-end model. He uses it for all his conference calls." "If he used it for calls, the audio files might be backed up to his Apex cloud server," Diana mused. "But you'd never get access to that." "But it's also connected to the household cloud account," Sarah said, the idea forming rapidly. "The one we share for photos, music, calendars." He connected it so he could access his study playlist from the living room. He was so proud of it. "Sarah," Diana said, leaning forward, "if you can legally access that cloud account, if your name is on it, you need to look. Now, don't download anything. Don't move anything. Just listen. Look for any files dated around the time he filed for divorce. Arrogant men get sloppy when they think they've already won." That night, Sarah sat in her kitchen, the penthouse silent. She opened her laptop and logged into the family cloud drive she hadn't touched in months. It was mostly photo albums and old vacation videos. But there, in a misfiled folder, labeled System Backup Source Office Hub, was a river of audio files, thousands of them. Most were just wakeword_unknown.mp3, but she filtered by date. She went to the week after he had filed for divorce, a date she knew he was working from home because he'd graciously given her time to process his departure. She found a file, Office Autor Audio, Oct 19 now 21 to 14.mp3. 21 to 14. That was 9:14 p.m. The file was 12 minutes long. Her hand trembled as she clicked play. The audio file started with the sound of ice clinking in glasses and a low, throaty laugh. It was Chloe's. "Chloe, you're a legend, Marcus, an absolute legend. I still can't believe she just took it." "Marcus, what's to take? She's in shock. She's been living in a bubble for a decade. She's too weak to fight, Chloe. That's why I married her. All that supportive partner stuff? It's just a synonym for no spine." Sarah's stomach clenched. She felt the bile rise in her throat, but she forced herself to listen. "Chloe, but that post-nup, God, that was brilliant. hiding it in the insurance papers. How did you even think of that? Marcus, a low chuckle. She was always signing things for the house. School donations, charity auction forms, renovation permits. I had Robert Shaw, my lawyer, draft it. He said it was fraud in the inducement and technically illegal if she contested it. But I knew she wouldn't. She trusts me. Or well, she did. All I had to do was slip it into the middle of a 50-page insurance rider. Her signature is 100% genuine. She'll never prove she didn't know what she was signing. This was it. This was the smoking gun. This was what Diana needed. Sarah's hand flew to the mouse to save the file, but then Chloe's next word stopped her. Chloe. And now, it's just us. We'll run Apex together. The new power couple. My father is going to be so impressed when I tell him I'm going to be Mrs. Thompson. Marcus. Absolutely, baby. Just you and me. You, me, and your father's entire distribution network. This acquisition is going to be a masterpiece. There was a silence, then the sound of a kiss. Chloe. I'm going to grab some more champagne. Don't you dare make another brilliant move without me. Marcus. I wouldn't dream of it. Sarah heard the sound of the heavy study door opening and closing. Chloe was gone. Sarah almost stopped the recording, but then she heard the sound of Marcus's fingers tapping on his phone. A new call was being placed. She heard her husband's voice, but the tone was different. The warmth he'd used with Chloe was gone, replaced by the same cold, dismissive tone he'd used on her. Marcus. Sure? Yeah, it's me. Listen. He sighs. The little fool just left. Yeah, Chloe. No. She's swallowing every word of it. She actually thinks she's going to be my partner. She thinks this is about love. Sarah's blood ran cold. Marcus. God, no. She's leverage. That's all she's ever been. Her father, Robert Jensen, is on the board of Cygnus Logistics. You know, the company I've been trying to acquire for a year. He's been the lone holdout vote. There was a pause. Marcus was listening to his lawyer on the other end. Marcus. Of course she is. She's been feeding me intel on her father's company for months, thinking she's helping our future. The second that acquisition goes through, he scoffs. I'll cut Chloe loose with a decent severance. The last thing I need is another partner, especially one who thinks she's smart. She's more naive than Sarah ever was. I'll find a way to pin the whole intel leak on her if she makes a fuss. She'll be lucky to avoid prison. The recording ended. Sarah sat in the dark kitchen, the laptop's glow illuminating her face. She wasn't just shaking anymore. She was perfectly, terrifyingly still. He wasn't just a cheater. He wasn't just a con man. He was a predator. He was using Chloe's love for him to destroy her and her own father. He was planning to discard her just as callously as he had discarded Sarah, but with the added threat of a criminal charge. Sarah saved the file, evidencefinal.mp3. She emailed it to Diana Hayes with a simple subject line. I think this is what you call a smoking gun. Diana's reply came 3 minutes later. Oh, Sarah, this isn't a smoking gun. This is a nuclear bomb. The hearing is in 2 weeks. Don't say a word. Let him walk in there thinking he's already won. The 2 weeks leading up to the divorce hearing were the longest of Sarah's life. Marcus was insufferably smug. He'd moved Chloe into a new high-rise apartment, closer to the office, he'd said, and was openly parading her around town. He sent Sarah's lawyer a final, generous offer, which was essentially the original, fraudulent post-nup agreement. He thinks you're going to roll over, Diana said on their final call. He's counting on you being that weak woman he described on the tape. He'll have his lawyer, Robert Shaw, paint you as a bitter, gold-digging wife. "And what will we be doing?" Sarah asked. "We," Diana said, a grim smile in her voice, "are going to let him. We'll let him build his case, high and proud, and then we're going to play that 12-minute file and watch it all burn down." The morning of the hearing, Sarah dressed with meticulous care. She chose a simple, conservative navy blue dress. No jewelry, save her thin wedding band, which she planned to remove in the courtroom. She looked like what they expected, the grieving, abandoned wife. She walked into courtroom 3B. It was exactly as she'd pictured. Heavy oak paneling, flags standing stiffly beside the judge's bench. Marcus was already there, whispering with his lawyer, the infamous Robert Shaw. Shaw was a big man with a booming voice and a reputation for crushing opponents. Then Chloe walked in. She wasn't dressed like a mistress hiding in the shadows. She wore a stunning, crisp, white power suit. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked like the future Mrs. Thompson, there to witness the final, pathetic exit of the former. She caught Sarah's eye and gave her a small, pitying smirk before taking her seat in the front row of the gallery, directly behind Marcus. The judge entered. Judge Evelyn Reed, a woman in her 60s with a face that suggested she had seen everything and was impressed by none of it. The hearing began. "Your Honor," Robert Shaw boomed, standing up. "This is a simple, straightforward dissolution. My client, Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Thompson, have a valid, notarized post-nuptial agreement, signed 10 years ago. We have submitted it as Exhibit A." He proceeded to paint a picture of Marcus as a brilliant, hard-working visionary, and Sarah as a woman who had enjoyed a life of extreme luxury, while contributing nothing to the business's success. "Mr. Thompson is acting with extreme generosity, Your Honor," Shaw continued. "He is allowing Mrs. Thompson to keep the marital home, a $15 million penthouse, and is offering a significant alimony package, despite her clear lack of contribution. We are here today simply to ask the court to honor the agreement she willingly signed." The judge looked at Diana Hayes. "Ms. Hayes, your response?" Diana stood, calm and poised. "Your Honor, we contest the validity of the post-nuptial agreement in its entirety." Shaw scoffed. "On what grounds? Spousal regret?" "On the grounds of fraud, Your Honor," Diana said, her voice cutting through the room. "We assert that my client was tricked into signing the document, that its contents were maliciously misrepresented to her as insurance papers by her husband." Shaw laughed. "That is an outrageous, baseless accusation. Does Miss Hayes have any proof of this fantasy? Or is this just a desperate, last-ditch attempt to bleed my client dry?" Judge Reed looked at Diana. "This is a very serious claim, Miss Hayes. You had better have more than your client's testimony." "I do, Your Honor," Diana said. "We have evidence, a 12-minute audio file, recorded on the defendant's own smart home device, in his own study, where he explicitly admits to the fraud." "Ms. Hayes, your response?" Judge Reed's voice was flat, impatient. She was a woman who had no time for theatrics, and Robert Shaw's grandstanding had clearly worn her thin. Diana Hayes stood, the picture of professional calm. She held a single, slim manila folder. "Your Honor," she said, her voice clear and precise, cutting through the heavy air. "We contest the validity of the post-nuptial agreement in its entirety." Robert Shaw let out a theatrical, barking laugh. "Contest? On what grounds? Spousal regret? I spent too much at Neiman Marcus, and now I want more syndrome." Marcus smirked. In the gallery, Chloe giggled, a sharp, unpleasant sound. Diana waited for the echo of his voice to die. "On the grounds of fraud, Your Honor. Criminal fraud. We assert that my client was tricked into signing a document she was told was an insurance rider. We assert that her signature was obtained under false pretenses, with malicious and premeditated intent to defraud her of her marital property. The courtroom's atmosphere, already cold, dropped another 10 degrees. The word criminal hung in the air. Shaw's expression hardened from performance to genuine anger. That is an outrageous, slanderous, and baseless accusation. Does Miss Hayes have any proof for this fantasy? Or is this just a desperate, last-ditch attempt to bleed my client dry? She signed the document. Her signature is genuine. It's over. Judge Reed turned her penetrating gaze to Diana. This is a very serious claim, Miss Hayes. The most serious one you can make in a civil case. You had better have more than your client's testimony. I do, Your Honor, Diana said, her voice unwavering. We have proof. We have evidence. What evidence? Shaw boomed. A fabricated email? A hearsay she said from a disgruntled maid? We have a 12-minute audio file, Diana said, recorded on the defendant's own smart home device, in his own study, in the marital home. A recording on which Mr. Thompson explicitly and proudly admits, in his own voice, to the entire conspiracy, from conception to execution. The silence that followed was absolute. It was as if a vacuum had sucked all the sound from the room. Marcus Thompson, who had been leaning back in his chair, slowly straightened. The blood drained from his face, leaving a pasty, grey pallor. Robert Shaw, for the first time, looked genuinely stunned. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. "Objection!" Shaw finally roared, finding his voice. He was on his feet, his face crimson. "Objection! Illegal wiretapping! Gross violation of privacy! This is a setup! This is entrapment! This recording, if it even exists, is fruit of the poisonous tree. It is fundamentally, categorically, and absolutely inadmissible." Diana Hayes didn't flinch. She waited for his tirade to end. "On the contrary, Your Honor," she said, addressing the judge. "The recording was not made by an illegal wiretap planted by my client. It was made by the home's integrated smart hub, a device Mr. Thompson himself installed. This device was linked to the family cloud account, an account to which my client, Mrs. Thompson, has had full, legal, and shared access for over a decade. It was recorded in the marital home, where she is a co-owner. There is no expectation of privacy from a co-owner on a shared family server. It is not an illegal wiretap. It is an admission by a party, and under the Illinois rules of evidence, it is 100% admissible." Shaw was shaking his head, trying to form another argument, but Diana had just boxed him in. He had been outmaneuvered. Judge Reed looked at Shaw, her face a mask of cold fury. "Your objection is noted, Mr. Shaw, and it is overruled. I find Ms. Hayes's argument sound. I want to hear this. The court will hear this." She motioned to the AV equipment. "Ms. Hayes, you will play the file, and I want a transcript. The court will have a transcript. I want this on the record. Does your client have the file ready?" "She does, Your Honor," Diana said. "Mrs. Thompson will play the file herself." For the first time, all eyes fell on Sarah. She was no longer the small, defeated wife in the navy dress. She was the center of gravity. Her heart was a drum against her ribs, but her hands were steady. Those hands, which had meticulously restored 17th-century masterpieces, did not tremble. She stood, picked up her laptop bag, and walked with a steady, unhurried pace to the counsel's table. She opened her laptop, the soft whir of the fan sounding like a jet engine in the silence. She plugged in the HDMI cable. She clicked the audio jack into place. As she worked, she could feel their eyes on her. Marcus was whispering, a furious, sibilant hiss to Robert Shaw. "What is it? What could she have? It's nothing. It's a bluff. Stop her. Shaw could only watch, his face a mask of dread. In the gallery, Chloe Jensen was no longer bored. The smug, pitying smile was gone, replaced by a tight-lipped confusion. She watched Sarah with a new, sharp interest. This wasn't part of the plan. She crossed her arms, her $2,000 Justin Clou bracelet, the one from the Amex bill, gleaming under the fluorescent lights. The large white projection screen, previously retracted, hummed to life and descended from the ceiling, covering the panelled wall behind the judge. Sarah's desktop appeared, a simple, serene photo of a Japanese garden. Then her mouse moved. She opened a folder. She clicked a single file. Evidence, final.mp3. "The court is ready, Mrs. Thompson," Judge Reed said. Sarah clicked. Play. The first sound was shockingly loud in the tense room, the clink of ice against a heavy glass. Then a low, throaty laugh. Chloe's laugh. Chloe audio. "You're a legend, Marcus. An absolute legend. I still can't believe she just took it." On the screen, the transcript began to scroll, the black and white words stark and final. In the gallery, Chloe's tense expression melted. She beamed. Her smugness returned, tenfold. This wasn't a problem. This was praised. She sat up straighter, smoothing the lapels of her white suit, and glanced at the back of Marcus's head with pure, unadulterated adoration. Her man. Her legend. Marcus audio. "What's to take?" "She's in shock. She's been living in a bubble for a decade. She's too weak to fight, Chloe. That's why I married her. All that supportive partner stuff? It's just a synonym for no spine." Chloe's smile froze. It didn't fall. It just died. The light in her eyes flickered. A line of confusion appeared between her perfect eyebrows. She shifted, uncomfortable. This was cruel. But it was about Sarah, not her. She could live with it. Marcus himself was rigid, his face turning a dull, angry red. This was humiliating, but not yet illegal. He shot a look of pure venom at Sarah. She wasn't looking at him. She was watching Judge Reed. Then, the second part of the exchange began. Chloe, audio. "But that post-nup, God, that was brilliant. Hiding it in the insurance papers. How did you even think of that?" The courtroom held its collective breath. Marcus audio. A low chuckle. "She was always signing things for the house. I had Robert Shaw, my lawyer, draft it. He said it was fraud in the inducement, and technically illegal if she contested it. But I knew she wouldn't. She trusts me. All I had to do was slip it into the middle of a 50-page insurance rider. Her signature is 100% genuine." A low, strangled groan came from the defense table. It was Robert Shaw. His pen had clattered from his trembling hand and rolled onto the floor. His face was the color of wet ash. His name? He had just been named, on a court record, by his own client, as a co-conspirator to a felony. His entire career, his reputation, his license. It was all flashing before his eyes. Judge Reed's eyes snapped from the scrolling transcript to Robert Shaw. She stared at him for a full 5 seconds. Her expression was no longer just stern. It was prosecutorial. Marcus Thompson looked like he had been punched in the gut. He was staring, wide-eyed at the speakers, as if he could somehow, by force of will, make his own voice stop. He remembered this conversation. He had been so proud, so arrogant. But the recording wasn't finished. Sarah's face remained impassive. This was just the first bomb. The second was for Chloe. Chloe audio. And now, it's just us. We'll run Apex together, the new power couple. My father is going to be so impressed when I tell him I'm going to be Mrs. Thompson." In the gallery, Chloe's terror receded, replaced by a shaky hope. That's right. It was them. They were a team. This was just the ugly part of the divorce. The audio file continued, the sound of the heavy study door opening and closing. A pause. Sarah could see Marcus relax, just a fraction. He thought it was over. He thought the damage was limited to the post-nup. Then, the sound of his fingers tapping on his phone. The sound of a new call being placed. Marcus, audio. "Sure? Yeah, it's me. Listen." He sighs. "The little fool just left. Yeah, Chloe." The words hit the air like a physical slap. Chloe Jensen let out a sound, a small, sharp gasp, like a terrified bird. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her head snapped toward Marcus, her eyes wide with a horrifying, dawning disbelief. "No," she whispered. "No." Marcus refused to look at her. He was staring blankly at the judge, his face a stone mask, his entire body rigid, bracing for the impact. Marcus, audio. "No, she's swallowing every word of it. She actually thinks she's going to be my partner. She thinks this is about love." Chloe's face, which had been so smug and beautiful, began to crumble. Marcus, audio. "God, no. She's leverage. That's all she's ever been. Her father, Robert Jensen, is on the board of Cygnus Logistics. You know, the company I've been trying to acquire for a year? He's been the lone holdout vote." The revelation hung in the air, thick and toxic. This wasn't just infidelity. This was a cold, corporate assassination. He had used her to commit corporate espionage against her own father. Chloe was shaking, her whole body vibrating with the shock. No. Marcus, audio. "Of course she is. She's been feeding me intel on her father's company for months, thinking she's helping our future. The second that acquisition goes through," he scoffs, "I'll cut Chloe loose with a decent severance. The last thing I need is another partner, especially one who thinks she's smart. She's more naive than Sarah ever was." And then, the final, brutal, soul-destroying detonation. Marcus, audio. "I'll find a way to pin the whole intel leak on her if she makes a fuss. She'll be lucky to avoid prison." The audio file ended. The playback, complete MP3 chime, was the only sound. Sarah's mouse clicked, and the screen went black. The silence that descended was absolute. A heavy, suffocating blanket. Chloe Jensen stared at the blank screen, then at the back of Marcus Thompson's head. He still wouldn't look at her. He wouldn't give her the dignity of a denial, because it was all true. He wasn't her partner. He wasn't her legend. He was her executioner. He had used her love to destroy her family, and he was planning to send her to prison to save himself. Her face, streaked with tears, she wasn't aware she was crying, crumpled. The Justin Clou bracelet, a symbol of her victory, was a shackle. The white suit was a clown's costume. She wasn't the victor. She wasn't the new Mrs. Thompson. She was the little fool. She didn't just cry, she screamed. It wasn't a word. It was a raw, wounded, animal sound of pure, agonizing betrayal that echoed off the high ceilings. It was the sound of a life imploding. "You!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. You bastard!" She wasn't a corporate strategist. She was a heartbroken girl in a room full of strangers. She bolted. She scrambled over the wooden railing, separating the gallery, her high heel catching and snapping. She stumbled, fell to one knee, and pushed herself back up, clawing at the air. She ran, shoving the heavy courtroom doors open with a crash. Her agonized, hysterical sobs echoed back down the marble hallway as the doors swung shut, leaving a stunned, perfect, and terrible silence in their wake. The slam of the heavy oak doors echoed in the courtroom like a gunshot. The sound of Chloe Jensen's agonized, hysterical sobs faded down the marble hallway, leaving a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and arrogance out of the room. The court reporter's fingers hovered over her keys, her face pale. The bailiff, a burly man who had seen decades of domestic disputes, instinctively unclipped the strap on his holster before realizing the threat was not physical, but existential. Robert Shaw, Marcus Thompson's bulldog lawyer, was the color of old parchment. The sweat on his upper lip was no longer a glint. It was a river. He stared at the empty doorway where Chloe had been, his mind clearly racing, trying to calculate the blast radius of the bomb that had just detonated. Marcus Thompson himself was a statue. He remained rigid in his chair, his hands gripping the arms of the witness stand he had almost taken. He was staring at the blank projection screen, at the phantom after-image of his own words. The transcript was gone, but the words "little fool," "leverage," and "lucky to avoid prison" seemed to be burned into the white vinyl. Sarah, by contrast, was perfectly still. She sat beside Diana, her hands folded in her lap. She felt a strange, cold calm. The restorer in her had just stripped away the final layer of grime, and the forgery underneath was visible to the entire world. Judge Evelyn Reed was the first to break the spell. She slowly, deliberately, removed her reading glasses and polished them with a cloth. She placed them back on, her gaze sharpening as it fell on Robert Shaw. Her voice, when it came, was not loud. It was lethally precise. "Mr. Shaw," she said. Shaw jumped, his head snapping toward the bench. Your Honor, in light of that unfortunate emotional outburst from a member of the gallery." He was already spinning, trying to reframe the problem as Chloe's hysteria, not Marcus's confession. "Clearly this matter has unforeseen complications. We request an immediate recess." "A brief recess, Your Honor, to discuss a new settlement offer in chambers. A far more generous one." He was practically begging. He was trying to get this out of the public record, to stop the bleeding, to put the fire out while there was still something left to salvage. Judge Reed let him finish. She let the word "generous" hang in the frigid air and die. "Settle what exactly, Mr. Shaw?" the judge asked, her voice laced with ice. "Let's be very clear about what we just heard. Are you proposing we settle the conspiracy to commit fraud, which your client just admitted to on a legal recording? Are we settling the technically illegal post-nuptial agreement that the recording suggests you, an officer of this court, drafted? Are we settling the admitted, premeditated plot to commit corporate espionage and insider trading? Are we settling the fact that your client was planning to frame Ms. Jensen, a woman he involved in his crimes, to cover his own tracks?" With every question, Robert Shaw seemed to shrink. He had gone from a bulldog to a terrified poodle. "Your Honor, I must—" "No, I must, Mr. Shaw," Judge Reed snapped, her voice finally rising. "You will sit down. You are not discussing a settlement. You are not going to chambers. You are going to sit there and listen to Ms. Hayes, who, unlike you, appears to have come to this hearing with a case built on something other than deceit and arrogance." She turned her gaze to Diana Hayes. "Ms. Hayes, the floor is yours. I suggest you proceed." Diana stood up, the very picture of calm, righteous competence. She held a new, thin folder in her hand. "Thank you, Your Honor," Diana said. "First, in light of what the court has just heard, which I have now entered into evidence as Exhibit B, titled The Thompson Confession, I formally move for the immediate summary judgment and nullification of Exhibit A, the contested post-nuptial agreement. We assert it is void ab initio on the grounds of fraud in the inducement, unconscionability, and blatant bad faith." "Granted," Judge Reed said instantly, without a flicker of hesitation. "The post-nuptial agreement dated October 14th, 2015 is hereby declared null and void. Strike it from the record." She made a sharp note on her docket. "Please continue, Ms. Hayes." "Now," Diana said, "to the matter of the marital estate. As the post-nup is void, we revert to Illinois' equitable distribution laws. The marital estate, as we have valued it, including all holdings, properties, and the full $500 million valuation of Apex Solutions, is to be divided." "Objection," Shaw managed to croak, rising halfway from his chair. "Apex Solutions is my client's business. He built it. Mrs. Thompson has no claim." "On what grounds, Mr. Shaw?" Diana cut him off, her voice like a scalpel. "On the grounds that she was a supportive partner with no spine. We just heard your client admit that he married her for those traits, which he then exploited for 15 years. Sarah Thompson's unpaid emotional, social, and strategic labor was the scaffolding that allowed Apex to be built. She is a co-founder in all but name, and this court just heard the proof that her name was stolen from her. The 50-50 baseline for a 15-year marriage is just the starting point." Diana walked a step closer to the judge's bench. "Your Honor, we are no longer seeking 50%. This is not an equitable situation. This was a calculated multi-year conspiracy. Therefore, we are amending our petition. We are seeking a 70% share of all marital assets." Marcus, who had been catatonic, snapped his head up. 70? Diana didn't look at him. She addressed the judge. "The 70% is broken down as follows. 50% as my client's rightful, baseline marital share. An additional 10% in punitive damages for the calculated, malicious, and criminal fraud perpetrated against her. And a final 10% for the intentional infliction of emotional distress and as a disgorgement of profits related to the Cygnus Logistics deal, a deal that was only possible due to criminal conspiracy, the assets of which my client has a right to." Robert Shaw was on his feet, sputtering. "Your Honor, this is vindictive. It's preposterous. There is no precedent. There is every precedent for sanctioning criminal behavior, Mr. Shaw." Diana's voice cracked through the room. "And I am not finished." She turned her head slightly, just enough to look at Marcus. "Your Honor, we are also aware that Mr. Thompson, when cornered, is a man who acts out of spite. We just heard him threaten to burn it all to the ground, figuratively. We have no faith he wouldn't do so, literally." Marcus's eyes widened. He knew what was coming. "Therefore, I petition for an immediate injunction and the appointment of a temporary receiver for Apex Solutions, effective this second. We move to have Mr. Thompson's assets frozen, his access to all company accounts revoked, and his voting shares suspended, pending the final division of assets. He cannot be allowed to liquidate the company, transfer funds offshore, or destroy the very asset that this court is now dividing. He is a flight risk and a financial terrorist to his own corporation." This was the true, killing blow. The money was one thing. The power was everything. She was taking his company. "And finally," Diana said, her voice softening, but with a terrible finality, "we have a legal and ethical duty to report these findings. This afternoon, we will be forwarding the complete audio file, along with relevant financial statements, to the District Attorney's Office, with a formal request for a criminal investigation into Mr. Thompson for conspiracy to commit fraud. We will be forwarding the same packet to the Securities and Exchange Commission, regarding the admitted plot for insider trading and market manipulation in the matter of Cygnus Logistics. And, she said, turning to face Robert Shaw directly, her eyes boring into his, we will be filing a formal 12-page complaint with the Illinois State Bar Association, citing Mr. Shaw's explicit mention on the audio file as a co-conspirator, seeking his immediate disbarment. Robert Shaw didn't just sit down. He collapsed. He fell into his chair as if his strings had been cut, his mouth open, his multi-million-dollar career evaporating before his very eyes. "My license," he whispered, so quietly only the court reporter could hear him. 30 years. Gone. Marcus Thompson finally broke. The statue cracked wide open. The cold, calculating CEO vanished, and in his place was a trapped, raging animal. "You can't!" he bellowed, surging to his feet, his $5,000 suit bunching at his shoulders. He pointed a shaking finger not at Diana, but at Sarah. You did this! You, bitch! You tricked me! You spied on me! That recording is illegal. It's inadmissible. This is my company. I built it." He was unraveling, his voice echoing with the same hysterical pitch as Chloe's. "I'll burn it all to the ground. You'll never see a dime. I'll file for bankruptcy. I'll destroy it all before I let you. Order!" Judge Reed's voice was a physical force, amplified by the gavel she slammed down so hard it cracked the wooden block. "Order! Bailiff! On your feet!" The bailiff moved, placing a heavy hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Sit down, sir. Now." Judge Reed was standing, her face a mask of judicial fury. "Mr. Thompson, you will be silent. You will sit down, or I will have you held in contempt of court, and you will spend the night in a cell, which is, I suspect, precisely where you are headed anyway. So perhaps you'd like a preview." Marcus, shocked by the force of her voice, crumpled back into his chair, his chest heaving, his face a mottled red. Judge Reed glared at him for a long, silent 10 seconds. Then she sat. "Mr. Shaw, what is left of your legal career depends on your client not saying another word. Do you understand me?" Shaw, ashen, could only nod. "Good," Judge Reed said. She looked at her notes. "Ms. Hayes, your motions are, given the extraordinary circumstances, not only reasonable but necessary. The motion to nullify is granted. The amended petition for a 70-30 asset split is taken under advisement. But I will state for the record that I am finding in favor of your argument. The final division will be confirmed at a new hearing, which I suspect will be a formality." She picked up her gavel. "The motion for an immediate injunction and the appointment of a court receiver for Apex Solutions is granted, effective immediately. Mr. Thompson, you are hereby ordered to surrender all keys, passcodes, and access to company property. You will be escorted from your office this afternoon. A temporary restraining order is also granted, preventing you from contacting your wife, Ms. Jensen, or any employee of Apex Solutions or Cygnus Logistics. You are a party to a criminal investigation. Do not leave the state." She looked at Marcus, then at Sarah. "This hearing is adjourned." The gavel cracked. It was over. The silence that followed was different. It was the silence of an aftermath. Robert Shaw had his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking in a silent sob for his lost career. Marcus Thompson just sat there, a hollow man in an expensive suit, his empire, his mistress, and his freedom gone in the space of 12 minutes. Sarah Thompson took her first deep breath in 15 years. It was shaky, but it filled her lungs. She felt quiet, not triumphant, not vengeful. She felt like a restorer who had just finished a grueling, toxic, 15-year project. The masterpiece wasn't the painting itself, but the clean, empty canvas underneath. She slowly, deliberately, packed her laptop into her bag. The small click of the zipper felt deafeningly loud. Diana gave her a small, respectful nod, already gathering papers to file the injunction. Sarah stood up. Her legs felt light. She walked down the aisle, her simple navy dress suddenly feeling like armor. She paused as she passed the defense table. Marcus was staring at the wood grain, his life in ruins. He flinched as her shadow fell over him, but he couldn't look up at her. Sarah looked at her own left hand, at the 5-carat diamond he had given her. It wasn't a symbol of love. It had been a down payment. A manacle. She slipped the heavy, cold ring off her finger. It left a pale, indented mark on her skin, a sign of a pressure that was finally, blessedly, gone. She didn't throw it at him. She didn't say a word. She simply reached out and placed the ring gently on the polished wooden railing, directly in his line of sight. The small metallic clink was the quietest, most final sound in the entire room. It was the sound of a closing lock, a finished chapter. Then she turned and walked away. She pushed open the heavy courtroom doors. The light from the building's vast marble atrium was blinding. Her eyes adjusted, and she saw her, Chloe Jensen. She was no longer the smug, white-suited victor. She was a wreck. She was crumpled on a hard wooden bench near the elevators, her face a grotesque mess of black mascara and raw, red grief. Her perfect blonde ponytail was coming undone. She was the little fool, and the truth of it had shattered her. As Sarah approached, Chloe looked up. Her eyes were wide, red-rimmed, and filled with a terrifying, desperate question. She looked at Sarah, the woman she had helped to destroy, as if Sarah had the answers, as if Sarah could somehow fix this. Sarah stopped. She looked at the woman who had been her rival, the woman who had slept with her husband, and she felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, not even triumph, just a profound, bone-deep sadness. This is what he did. This was the wreckage he left behind. Chloe was just another forgery, another victim. Sarah gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. It was not a nod of forgiveness. It was an acknowledgement. I see you. We were both his victims. Then Sarah turned and walked away from her too. She walked past the security checkpoint, through the revolving doors, and out onto the steps of the courthouse. The November air in Chicago was bitingly cold, but it felt clean. It stung her face, and it felt real. She pulled the collar of her coat tight, walked to the curb, and hailed a cab. As the car pulled away, she didn't look back. She was no longer Mrs. Thompson. She was just Sarah. And for the first time in a very long time, she was free. And that, everyone, is what happens when arrogance meets quiet intelligence. Marcus thought he was playing chess, but Sarah was the one who saw the entire board. He thought his wife was a silent partner, someone to be discarded. He forgot that the quietest people are often the most observant. He didn't just lose his wife or his mistress. He lost his company, his reputation, and his freedom, all because he underestimated the woman who had built him. The truth, played on a courtroom screen, was a bomb of his own making. What did you think of Sarah's incredible moment of justice? Have you ever seen someone's arrogance lead to their own spectacular downfall? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you love stories where justice is served cold, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see it, and be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss the next story.